Before we start on the animation of our lamp, we're going to do one thing in the rig file. So it's very difficult for us to go and select every single curve every single time we want to set a key. So what we're going to do is create a selection set that allows us to quickly select all the animatable controls and then key them all at once. So let's start by selecting the root and then the body. Let's select the control for the neck or the arm, and then let's select the head control. Let's also select the pole vector control. So we have five things selected all at once. And then we're going to go up here to create sets quick select set. And we'll just call this all underscore keyable. Once we've created that now, you can open this up. This is not an actual group. This is just a way to select things quickly so that you can see that the hierarchy is still the same. If we open up our root offset, you can see that all of those are still in the same hierarchy. This is just a separate selection that we can do quickly. You can either drag select all of the objects in that set, or you can click on the set, you can say select set members, and it selects all of the objects in that set. So once we've done that, then we're ready to get into animation. So let's go ahead and save our rig, and let's create a new file. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is reference in the lamp rig. Remember, we use references because it allows us to make a central rig file that then can be updated in all animation files if there's any additional changes. It's just a good habit to get into and a good workflow that's pretty industry standard. So let's go to File and then down to Create Reference. And then once that window comes up, we're going to go and find our lamp rig. And then once the lamp rig comes in, then we're ready to animate. So let's just grab our tools and see if they work. Yes, all that works. Okay, and all of these controls seem to be functioning correctly. Now you'll see when you create a reference, it automatically creates a namespace that is the name of the file that you brought in that sometimes can be a little bit long and distracting. So if you go to File and then Reference Editor, and then bring your reference editor over and just call this rig. Just a simple three-letter word. You can see that it goes before all of the names of the objects, but it's not too distracting. So once this is done, then let's quickly save the file. We'll save this is our just our animation. So I'll save this in here, and I'll just say lamp underscore jump. So once you've saved the file, it just allows you to make changes, and then it'll auto save with that name, so you know what things are when you need to go and recover a file. So you've created your animation file, you've created your character. Now you've brought that in as a reference. So let's go to Create Polygon Primitives and then create a plane. So this is just going to be our ground plane. We'll make this big, and then under your polyplane, just go ahead and open that up. And you should see these settings here, subdivision width and height. Just go ahead and set those to 1. That'll turn off all of the extra spans. And then we'll just go ahead and go to modify and freeze transforms on that. So once we've done that, we won't touch the plane again. We're just going to concentrate on the animation. So over here, we're going to open up our all keyable set because that allows us to select things quickly. And we're going to set up an initial pose for the character. Usually when you're animating a character, they're going to come in and out of the same pose. This would be considered like an idle pose in a game. Let's set our time frame to 70, and let's make sure that we're set on 30 frames a second. We'll also make sure that auto key is on. So make sure auto key is on. One of the other things that you can do is so that you don't accidentally select the mesh or select your ground plane is you can turn off all of these objects under your selection, and you could just turn on NURBS curves. Now this is just going to let us select the NURBS curves, but you see it will not let us select the locator that we use to create the pole vector. So then you just need to turn on this little question mark at the end. These are the extras, so that allows you to select that. So now all you're going to do is be able to select the keyable controls. So let's go ahead and set up a quick pose for our character to come in and out of. We're starting at frame 0, so we're not going to key anything quite yet. Let's just go ahead. We're going to set a somewhat of a neutral pose. You can see I just moved my arm down, and then I angled my head down. Then let's select all of our keyable controls, and we'll hit S. Now, remember, we are in the keyable or the keying stage. We're going to set our keyframes here in our scene. And the reason that we're going to key all of our objects at the same time is because we don't want them to slip between keys. So For instance, when I do my next key, which is going to be the anticipation pose, I'm going to move this down. But if I was going to go to the jumping pose and I was going to push my root off the ground, because I had not keyed it at frame 10, you'll see that my root starts to float before the character jumps. So we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that at every keyframe, we set a key for all of our keyable controls. So let's go to frame 10. Now the way I'm going to do this is a method that I call animating on the tens. Pretty standard for a lot of animators. It makes the math a little bit easier when you're keying, but we're going to change those in our timing pass. So let's just go ahead and work every 10 frames for our keyframes. The first pose we make is going to be called the anticipation pose. So for a jump, there's going to be 6 poses, including a duplicate at the end that is the first frame. We're going to come in and out of the same first pose. So at frame 10, we're going to do the anticipation pose. So we're going to bend the character down. We're going to bend his head down. And we're going to select all of our keyable controls, and we're just going to set a key. So it's a very simple pose to make, and that's one of the reasons that we are animating the lamp, is it's a very simple character. The next pose that we're going to make is called the jumping pose. It's going to be the moment that the character is jumping and lifting off the ground. Now we are using an IK handle, and sometimes when you push an IK handle too far, you'll see that it snaps straight. That's just going to the very extent of the IK. So we want to avoid that. So we never want to snap it so that the arm is straight. We just want to get right to the edge of that. So we're going to go ahead and do that there. We're going to take the root now, and we're going to move this up, and we're going to angle the root forward just a little bit. So it's going to look like he's kind of jumping off of his toes. Now you'll notice that because we have the rig set up in a very simple way with the head following the root, that the head is moving forward and backwards with the root. So we're going to kind of counter animate the head by moving it back over the root like this. And then we're going to move it up just a little bit, and we're going to angle the head up just slightly. Now, you can have the head look up as the character is jumping, but I have it look down, and we'll see that in the progression of our jump. So select all of your keys, and you're going to push key or S. So now your character is bending down, they're pushing off. And now we're going to go to the next pose in the jump. And the next pose is going to be our apex pose. That is the top of the jump in which the character is neither rising nor falling. This is sort of a moment of suspension. So the character is jumping high and the root is kind of coming up. You can bend the root a little bit like this, and you can angle your head up a little bit like this. And what you want to do is you want to kind of have that compression where the root and the head come together again, because contrasts really make good animation. So here we have a contrast between squatted down and pushing off. Here we have that same contrast when the character comes up into this apex pose. Now this apex pose is going to be a point in which the character is sort of hovering in the air. It'll be the highest point of the jump. So we'll go ahead and select all of our keyable controls and hit S. Now there's a couple different ways you can do the next pose. You can either copy from the push-off pose and alter it, or you can go and you can hand key it. I'll hand key this one here, so I'm just going to take my root and I'm going to move it back down to the ground. So you can zero out all the keys, and then I'm just going to lift it up, and I'm going to go opposite of the push-off pose. So here the character is rocking forward like they're jumping off their toes. Here the character is going to be rocking backwards like they're landing on their heels. So then let's also select our arm control. We'll set that to 0. And we'll move this back up. Whoops, sorry. I'm going to select my wrist control, make sure that that's set to 0. So now my character is going to be landing, right? So the character is coming down, the neck is extended, and it is looking up. So this is similar to the ball bounce, where the character is stretching when it's pushing off the ground, and it's stretching as it comes into the ground. So let's just move this forward just a little bit so the character is coming up, and then as it's landing, we can see this is the moment just before the character is about to touch the ground. So that is our next key. Let's select all of our keyable controls and hit S. And then the last true key is going to be kind of a duplicate of the anticipation pose. This is going to be something called the absorption pose. So we'll select frame 10, we'll middle mouse button out to frame 50, and I'm just going to make a couple of changes. So I'm going to angle the head down, I'm going to lean it forward, and I'm going to push him down just about as far as I can go without it intersecting the base here. So now the character is landing, boom, and going down. And then the last key pose is going to be a copy from the first pose. So let's copy that out and go to frame 60 and hit S. So the character is now landing, absorbing, and then going back into this last pose. So let's just quickly play through our animation and see how it looks. Okay, so don't worry about timing. We're worried more about the poses and making the poses look good. I notice here that in the apex, I want to push this up just a little bit more, and I'm going to rock the character back just a little bit. So let's go ahead and play back through. Okay, so I know it's hard to see, but in the process, this is exactly where we want to be. This would be a blocking phase where we've blocked in all of the keyframes, but we've not timed it. So let's go ahead and save our file. And then this is going to be a good place to make sure that you save every time you get to the end of one phase. So this would be the blocking phase. When we move to the timing phase, we are going to retime some of the keys. So remember, we've only set keyframes for all of the controls on each frame, so every 10 frames. So everything is sort of happening at once. This is just going to be a general high-level timing pass that helps us to make the animation feel about the right speed. So let's start with this squatting down. I like the fact that it takes a little bit longer to squat down. The anticipation pose generally takes a little bit more time. This is where the character is storing up energy. It's this motion here where the character goes from squatting down to pushing off that we really want to happen relatively quickly. So let's go ahead and select this push off pose. We're going to move this down until frame 13. So now it's only taking 3 frames for the character to push off and into the jump motion. So I really like that. As we're doing this, let's make sure that we show our graph editor. So I'm just going to bring my graph editor up here, and mine's showing up separately. So if you see that same, just make sure that you go here to workspaces and you set it to animation. So when you set it to animation, then I'll get rid of all these extra windows. And now my graph editor is going to be down here. It's going to be easy for us to see all of the things that we need to see in the window. So you'll see that as the character pushes off, even though the timing looks better, the character still slowly pushes off the ground. And that's just because Maya defaults to auto keyframing or auto tangents. So we're going to right click on this and we're going to change the tangents to linear. You can do that on any of these keys. You can also do it here in the graph editor. You can go to tangents or linear. Okay, so this push off looks good, but then the rise now, because I moved that down, is going to be a little bit too long. So we're going to push this down to about frame 23. So the jump itself is going to take about 10 frames. Now the up of the jump is going to be a little bit longer than the down. I always make the up last a little bit longer than the down. So then let's select the next key, which is going to be the landing pose. And let's bring that in and let's just go ahead and move that to like 32. So it's going to be 9 frames as opposed to 10 frames. And then we're going to right click on this and say tangents and linear. So now we have a linear keyframe at the push off and we have a linear keyframe at the landing. And then just like this motion here, the explosive push off motion is going to take a short amount of time. We want this absorption motion to take a little bit less time too. So let's just go ahead and set that to like 6 frames difference. So now the character absorbs, and then we're just going to move in our last keyframe to about frame 48. So let's go ahead and bracket our preview window and go ahead and push play. So now let's see if this looks better. Okay, so much better than the last time that we did it. This would be what you would call first pass or pose to pose. This is going to be the time where we would show this rough scene to an art director or a senior animator or a supervising animator. It carries with it all of the information that we need in the scene. It's not refined, but it does allow us to make changes to timing quickly. So this is a good time to get feedback. And as an animator, you want to get feedback early in the process to make sure that you're on the right track. And so that when you do an animation, you know that you've already nailed down the timing. Now you just need to go in and make refinement. Now that I've set all of the main keyframes in my scene, I'm going to go in and add keyframes to certain components or certain animatable controls. These are going to be called breakdown keyframes. They are going to be additional keyframes in between the main keyframes that are going to help us sell the animation and the weight of the character. So the first one that I'm going to do is I'm going to add a breakdown keyframe to make the path of the neck down into the anticipation pose a little bit more interesting. So first frame is at frame 0, anticipation pose is at frame 10. I'm going to go to frame 5 and I'm going to push this arm down a little bit so he's going to be getting more quickly into the anticipation pose, and I'm going to angle the head up. And you'll see that by doing that, by adding that additional keyframe, it makes the motion look a little bit more interesting. That overlap between the head and the arm gives the character a little bit more weight and personality. So here my character is pushing off. The next thing that I want to key is going to be the root. So while the character pushes off here, I get a pretty simple arc here, but I want to make this accentuated a little bit. Now you could do this in the tangents of the translate Y, but another easy way to do it is to go to the keyframe about 4 keyframes after the push off, and we're just going to push the root up a little bit more. So you'll see that it will make this arc look a little bit more abrupt and a little bit rise in the beginning of the jump. So now the character pushes off, and you can see it accentuates the time that he is in the air, and I really like that. The other thing that we can do is we can select the head and we can kind of angle the head down a little bit more. So the character now is generating more of that force. Like, think of it as when you're jumping, you generate more force with your shoulders, and the character is kind of coming up into the apex pose a little bit better. Now, we want to add that same drag that we had earlier, but we want to reverse this. So here the arm was going down a little bit faster. So from the apex pose to the land pose, we want to add a little bit more of that drag in here. And that means that we want the head to sort of stay up where it was in the apex pose. So now the head is staying up there. So you're extending the neck and you're going to bend it down. Now you'll notice that when I do these breakdown poses, I'm not keying every control. I'm just doing this on the controls that need to stay there. So I'm going to just do the head here, and then I'm going to take the root and I'm going to push this up just a little bit. So now my character sort of comes up and it stays up a little bit more, so it makes this motion just a little bit more interesting. Okay, so the next one that I want to add is I want to add a little bit more of a overlap in the head as it lands. So I'm going to do something a little bit different on this one, and I'm going to do something called bracketing. Means that I'm going to focus on the X rotation of my head. That's the forward and backward of my head. And I'm going to go to a keyframe, frame 38, is the keyframe where the neck is down and the head is down as well. But I want that head to overlap here. So instead of keeping the rotation key for my head at the same as my translation, right? So I'm moving up and down and I'm rotating the head. Those are two separate motions. I'm going to take the rotation key and I'm going to move it down about 3 frames. So now you see 38, the translation key stays there, but you can see the rotate X is not keyed there because the channel is lighter up here in the channel box. And then as the head comes up, moves up, that rotation is happening later. So that's going to be a bracket, means that the key is going to be offset or separated. And the reason I call it bracketing is because now I'm going to go in front of that key to frame 35, and I'm going to rotate the head up. So again, those counter motions, right? Where the head is going to rotate up because later it's going to rotate down, make for a very interesting and naturalistic motion. So let's go ahead and just take a look at our jump now that we've added some of these breakdown poses. So that's looking pretty good. The only thing that I see right now is that this absorption pose, it just feels a little bit soft. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the head and I'm going to push it down a little bit faster, and I'm going to increase the angle. So now as the character lands, that head is absorbing the weight a little bit faster. Okay, so the jump itself here feels good. Feels like it's got a little bit of weight, but what we're seeing is that the root is looking a little floaty because when the root is pushing off, you can see it's taking 1, 2, 3 frames and it's sort of hovering off the ground. It's not really snapping. So what I'm going to do is just for the root, during the push-off pose, I'm going to take this root key and I'm going to move it down to frame 12. So this explosive motion here is going to happen over 1 frame. This would be sort of like the foot leaving the ground on a walk sequence or a jump sequence. So this gives the character a little bit more energy. It makes the key a little bit more snappy. And we're going to do the same thing here in the last pose, where the root is going to slam down to the ground. You see right now it's happening over 6 frames. We're actually going to have it happen over 1 frame. So now the root is slamming down to the ground, right? So let's just go ahead and preview to see how that looked, how that changed the animation. Okay, it looks good, but it causes this little shudder in the head. And the reason for that is because the head is following the root. So we're just going to need to go in, we're just going to need to play a little trick, right? So the head is up here as the root slams down, and then it kind of snaps forward. Let's just go ahead and add an additional key for the head where it's more over the root. And you'll see that that kind of counters the motion of the root as it's slamming down. So there we go. We're getting a little bit of a shudder here, but we can just kind of counter that again by pushing the neck back a little bit. So now you can see that the root looks a little bit better, and the neck, when it's counter animated, looks a little bit better. Okay, we can push the head motion down a little bit more. So this motion here could be a little bit deeper. So let's raise the head up and angle it forward. And all of these are artistic or stylistic choices that you're going to make in your animation. Whether or not you want the jump to feel like mine, that's totally up to you. You can make the jump higher, you can make the jump lower, you can make it faster or slower. All of these things are going to help determine the visual weight of the character. So this would be a good example of something you would put in before you go to the final polish. And the polish would just include maybe some additional keys. You can add some additional smoothing. Usually you're going to play in the splines as well. So for instance, you could go into the root. You could go to translate Y. We select the tangents. We go here and we go to break tangents. And now we can select each one of these. And so we can make this push off and the landing a little bit more intense. These are just sort of the amount of things that you can do when you're in the polish phase. And the polish phase really goes on for as long as you want. But this is a really good opportunity now to show this as a finished piece and get final critique from your supervisor, your boss, somebody that would give you kind of the yay or nay on whether or not this is good to go. So now that we've completed this, we can go ahead and turn this in. This would be a good example of a finished product that you could turn in for our assignment. Good luck and have a good time animating.